All right, welcome back to the Calibrate Show. My name's Hunter France. Today I'm going to give you two signs that are happening right now on the earth that are, I think, pretty much being ignored. I don't want to say that. Hello and welcome back to the Calibrate Show. My name's Hunter France, and today I'm going to walk you through two signs that are happening on planet Earth right now that are telling us that either one, we're in the end times, or two, we're really darn close. So I hope you stick around if you're interested after the bumper. And welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that. That's a song that's called Bad Moon Rising. It's by Creedence Clearwater Revival, but that is my brother's version. You can check him out on Mr. Rock and Roll. That is Heath France is his name. You can go check him out. It's a nice channel. I'm really proud of him, even though he is dumb and ugly. He is my baby brother. Have to take a shot. Today, again, like I said, I am going to give you a couple signs, but first I want you to bear with me because I'm going to take us through the past. We're going to go through Ezekiel 38 real quick, Daniel 8 and 11. I'm not going to read them. If you want to read them, you can pause this video, go read them on your own. They're very important to the end times. In Ezekiel 38, and let me give you this map that I made. I took a modern map of these nations. Israel there in the blue. Bahrain, right there south of Bahrain is Qatar. I failed to put them on here, forgive me. But in the darker letters, I have the historic names, or names that I've taken from Ezekiel 38, other prophecies. There's Daniel 11. Let me actually show you a few of these real quick. So in your English translations, whatever translation you read from, right there in Libya and Sudan, you'll either see Cush, you might see Ethiopia, you might see Put, or you'll just see Libya. You'll see different versions of it. Got the ships of Katim, the merchants of Tarshish, Lebanon with a little arrow pointing to it. It's kind of small, so it didn't fit them all in there. And then, of course, the island of Crete. That'll come up later in a future map that I'm going to show you. So in these prophecies, and people who are preterists would know what I'm talking about here, it speaks of a man. I would say first and foremost, it's about the Antichrist, Ezekiel 38. This is the coalition that comes against Israel in the end. That's again mentioned in Daniel 8 and Daniel 11, prophecies that go over Alexander the Great, but end up talking eventually about this little horn, a man named Antiochus Epiphanes. Now, he is not the ultimate fulfillment of this prophecy, but he does fulfill the prophecy in a number of ways. The reason why I say he's not the ultimate is because, one, you'll end up seeing, he doesn't fulfill all of the prophecies. He just fulfills a lot of it. Sort of a type or a foreshadow of what is to come. And remember, the Bible does say, basically in a way of saying, history repeats itself. And I'll put that verse below as well. All right, so with that map in mind, hopefully you've had enough time to either screenshot it, study it, maybe even pause the video. You can look at it for a bit. I want to show you the historical map of Antiochus. So right here, what you're looking at, these are the Hellenistic kingdoms of that day. This is after Alexander the Great, after a part of his land has been parceled out. And in the green is the antagonistic nations towards Israel. This is Antiochus Epiphanes. Then you have the Ptolemaic kingdom, with the P, the Ptolemaic kingdom in the south, controlling parts of Judea, Egypt, modern-day Libya, and Sudan. During this dynamic, it is during these days that Antiochus would lead a conquest. He would come after Egypt, and the ships of Katim, mentioned in the prophecy, Rome would step in and push Antiochus back. He would take part of the land, but he would end up going back to his land and becoming enraged. He attacks Israel, sets up an abomination of desolation, sacrificing a pig in the temple, changing some of the nation's laws and times. This is why we get a little confused about what calendar to follow sometimes. In terms of like a religious calendar, I'll say. During these days, after the abomination of desolation, we're told the Antichrist comes back to Egypt. He attacks again and wins and finishes his invasion of Israel, occupying it, doing a number of things. Antiochus he persecutes the Jews for not quite 3.5 years. It's another kind of miss on the prophecy for Antiochus. It's not quite 3.5 years, but it's close. And during this time, he puts out a mark that he enforces. He pretty much does just about everything, minus what I've talked about. Now let me show you that same map. I'm going to strip it of what would be, I guess, the non-Greek kingdoms according to this map, the independent Greek states, Macedonia, things like that. I'm going to show you this map real briefly. I guess that one still has Macedonia. There's your Seleucid dynasty, the Ptolemaic dynasty. It's a little more clear. I took that and I made this little monster, and it is a monster. That's the Seleucid dynasty in the red, and in the blue would be the Ptolemaic dynasty. Again, antagonistic nations in the north, non-antagonistic nations in the south. Keep that map in mind and take a look at this one real quick before moving on. This is your map of the Abrahamic Accords. And then right there in the lighter color is the unofficial diplomatic ties that Israel has with Saudi Arabia and Oman. And Qatar even. It's a well-known fact, especially since October 7th, and even before that, I guess September of a year ago, when it hit the news, Israel and Saudi Arabia were working on peace. Actually, it's been well known for, I don't know, maybe 20 years or so. This is something they've been talking about for a long time. Keep that in mind. Political movements and shifts can take a long time. They can also happen really quick. So the Abrahamic Accords, right there in the darker colors, that's modern day. And some of this, like Egypt and Jordan, they've made peace with Israel a while back. UAE, Bahrain, and Sudan jumping on this is quite historic. And Saudi Arabia wanting to jump on it is truly historic. This is the number one, historically anyway, the number one state sponsor of terror. They have been replaced by nations like Iran. The common enemy of Saudi Arabia and Israel is Iran, and look what it's doing. It's forced them to become friends. It's a lot like what Winston Churchill said about Soviet Union, about a common enemy. And right here, your common enemy, can't talk today, your common enemy is Iran. Remember the nations that Bibi Netanyahu held up earlier this year? He did it in 2023, but he did it again this year in September in 24 at the UN address. He held up these, and I might even just put this photo in here, but he held up these images of a line, and north of the line was cursed nations, and south of the line was blessed nations. And he had all of these nations, the Abrahamic Accords, including Saudi Arabia, on that map. What he did not have, let me get up my new map here, was Turkey. North, he put the cursed nations, and he had them in black. He had Syria, Iraq, Iran. He had Lebanon. He did not have Turkey, and I think that's a big mistake. There's a lot of debate about Magog being in Russia. I believe it's Turkey because archaeological evidence puts it in Turkey. And they'll take the same names in Ezekiel 38, and they'll place them in their historical context. So they include Turkey and Russia. I exclude Russia, but might include them, saying like it's not like they're not going to be involved somehow. But look at Turkey, where they have Meshech, Togarmah, Tubal, Gomer. These are their historical locations. These nations outlined in red are your modern day antagonistic nations. I kind of failed with Qatar, as you can say. If you're from Qatar, I'm sorry. I that should probably be more purple, or maybe even light blue. It should be light blue. But despite that, you have the shaded region. That's the Seleucid and the Ptolemaic region. And then I have the borders of the modern nations outlined with their corresponding colors to what their current diplomatic situation is with Israel. I want you to notice Libya I put in purple. Why purple? They have a civil war, and on the other side of that civil war is the nation Turkey. They are backing a group in Libya trying to overthrow the government with a group that's from the Muslim Brotherhood, which Turkey, by the way, is part of. Sudan has their own issues with stuff. Now, Sudan has their own issues with stuff like that, but because they're part of the Abrahamic Accords, I put them in blue, and they're pretty solidly blue, but they do have their own purple issues, I'll say, as well. The difference is, and I said this earlier, in Daniel 11, the Antichrist eventually comes back. And I won't get into too much future look. I will say what we can expect from this map is in the future, the Antichrist will come up, whether that's Turkey, Syria, Iraq. Heck, I'll go ahead and give Russia to people if he comes even from there. Places like Libya, Sudan, and Egypt, he's going to attack. And he's going to try to control these regions. The reason I don't think it's Russia is because Turkey is being led by Erdogan, has been calling increasingly, much like Israel, and this is getting into the second sign about the temple, calling for the rebuilding of a third temple. Erdogan and many of his supporters have been calling for the reestablishment of the Islamic Caliphate, which Egypt, Libya, and Sudan were once a part of. And we read about this little horn in Daniel 8 coming up, and 3 horns are removed, and he replaces them. This is a little bit of speculating, but I suspect that we'll see the Antichrist attack these 3 nations. And they'll eventually be included in his kingdom as he is occupying, invading, and doing what he does in Israel. But this map right here it's the exact same. It's the same conditions, the same climate, the same political atmosphere, the same lighting, the same smell. As it was in the past, so it will be in the end. This looks the same. Which leads me, so now I'll go to the next sign. I've talked about this one before in a previous video. I think it was the previous video to this one. But I wanted to let you know that the second sign concerns the temple in Jerusalem. Now, the temple hasn't been built. There's not an agreement that it's been built. And some would probably say the Pact of the UN is a sign. I've skipped that one. And this is why. The context, the maps that we just looked at, don't necessarily mean that we're in the end times. What they mean is that we could be in the end times, or we could be getting very much ready to be in the end times within a year or two. And I say a year or two because in the second sign, it's about, again, the third temple, Israel's temple that they wouldn't have had for almost 2,000 years, since 70 AD. There's been a push for this for many decades. It's been a very small fringe movement of society that's grown legs and grown in size to where today you have prominent leaders in the Israeli government calling for the rebuilding of the temple and the right for Jews to perform religious duties on the Temple Mount. And since October 7th, there's been a number of firsts. Like that for maybe many of us Westerns, even Christians, maybe not quite understand because we don't know the history behind all this. But this past year, we have seen Jews praying on the Temple Mount, lying prostrate on the Temple Mount. That's a huge deal. I admit to you that I can't quite even relate to it or even quite fully grasp just how big of a deal it is. I just know it's a big deal. And switching over to the United States, over here to the West, for example, for a moment. President-elect Donald Trump and the staff he is putting together is definitely going to be the most pro-Israel staff in the history of the United States, including the Secretary of Defense. Forget his name. You can look him up. But the nominee for Secretary of Defense from Donald Trump is a man that has openly stated in public that Israel has the right to rebuild the temple and that it is today possible. And he said this during Donald Trump's time in office, the first tenure, after 2017, the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. That's a big deal. That by the way, big deal, biblically speaking. The statement in 2018 that followed by this man, big deal. And the fact that he's now Secretary of Defense, or getting ready to be, is a big deal. You also have Mike Huckabee and the rest of the staff in office that is very much pro-Israel. I would even say Zionist. Zionism isn't a curse word. Zionism is basically just me saying I believe that the Jewish Messiah, who is Jesus, Messiah ben David, Jesus, will come back and reign from Jerusalem as the Jewish Davidic king, and he will rule the world. And other nations will be allowed to rule under his authority, much like an alliance, if you will, but him being the ultimate ruler of it all. He's the only one that will control the entire globe. Not the Antichrist, not the globalists, not China, Russia, nobody. Only Jesus will eventually do that. And he will do it fairly. Like I said, he will allow certain nations to live, to still be their nations. I don't know if I have the words to express to you how important that is, though, about this news about the temple. So, to wrap it up, let me just say, if you read through Daniel 8, you start to read about this time frame, 2,300 evenings and mornings. And the reason why I say that we still can't truly know if we're in the end times yet is because, well, sign number 2, the temple, what I'm saying here, my sign number 2 is that the activity on the Temple Mount concerning the temple is right now a sign. It's not the sign. When the temple is built and they're doing sacrifices, whenever that may be, we're given this time frame in Daniel 8 of 2,300 evenings and mornings. And I don't think we'll know the exact day that count starts. I think we'll be pretty close when it does. That will be a whole new video. That will be there will be new signs of the end times. But right now, we are living in the days with the 2 things I've given you where we can truly say the context of the final 7 years of Daniel is in place. The only way we'll know, I believe, that we've actually started the final 7 years, barring some, or I should say, save for some, open vision that he gives his people, or to give some prophet or some dream. Just going from what is written in the Bible, the only way we can truly know we're in the end times is once that temple is built. But if you count 2,300 days, it's not 7 years. It's like 6 1/4, 6, maybe in a third. I think it's closer, maybe 6 years and a third, maybe even not quite half, maybe a fourth. 6 years, not a fourth. 2/5. But somewhere between there is about how long that is. And the temple, which means the temple is going to be built within the final 7 years, not the first day. And so it's not like the temple gets built and then we have exactly 7 years. It's sometime within the final 7 years. So in the first 3.5 years, there's probably the first few months that we won't be sure. And we're living in the days where we can say we might be in the first few months, but we can't be sure until we see the temple being built. But with everything in mind, with the war going on in the Middle East, with the way it's going, and clearly Israel is coming out the winner here, with the administration elect that is coming into office in the United States and their support for Israel, and we know post-war how people drop their guard and relax because war is over and we can have peace now. Just the climate's set. The conditions are ripe for the end times. And we are living in the days where we could wake up any day within any year from now looking at an agreement that allows Israel to build a temple, and then they'll start doing it. I look at this and I say, okay, I'm almost 100% sure I'm going to be alive to see this, and maybe within the next handful of years. I really am confident that in Donald Trump's tenure in office, we're going to see this. I truly believe that. But I'm not going to tell you that I'm 100% sure, because here's the important thing to remember. God at any moment can basically hit pause, seemingly. Time is always moving, and God always works within time. But we always come to times in our life where it seems like God slows it down. Events are happening. They're taking place in an increasing frequency. And it looks like they could really be doing this very, 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 very soon. But somehow we could reach a moment where God says, wait longer. I want to be honest and clear about that. But that being said, again, and the last thing I'll say before closing here is that the context is very clear and set. As it was before, so it'll be again. We are in the days where we could start any day, and we just don't know it. We could be within the final 7 years right now. Now, what we do with this knowledge, I don't really know. And I'll close like this. I know I've said it, I'll close a couple times, but here I'm actually going to close. How we respond by treating those we love and those we love but hate us. Taking the words of Jesus very seriously as far as forgiving those who persecute you, forgiving those who hate you. Not necessarily meaning you have to stay in a bad situation, but forgiving is very important. Keeping our eyes on the King who is coming. Using this information as a testimony to people. And becoming evangelistic. It doesn't necessarily mean we become missionaries. Go to your job and live in light of this. Be kind to people. And as time goes on and as things increase, like when we see the temple, we can really start saying to people, see, God is real. This was written long ago. Keep watching. But if you're not, this is the question I asked in my previous video. If you're seeing this, and you're saying nothing about it to anybody, then do you really love them and do you really love him, Jesus? Because this is what Jesus commanded of us. I admit, even I look at stuff like this and say, man, I don't know. Could this actually be real? Intuitively, I know it is. But man, it's so hard to respond because it's like, there's no way I could be this blessed. There's no way we could be, there's no way. And yet it's definitely happening in front of our very eyes. And I believe this Maranatha cry is how we need to respond. Come, Lord Jesus. Be with our loved ones. Be with those who have hated us. Because we are like them. We're human. We are also of the dust. Speak to those that we pray about. Speak to our loved ones. Speak to our family, our friends, those we knew long ago, and use us in these days. I think that's our response, the response of Jeremiah, to lay down our lives, whatever that looks like. It might just be kind to your neighbor. Stop being hostile. I could go on and on. I'm not a preacher, and I'm not going to get preachy now. Well, I'm going to stop getting preachy anyway. Just be humble. Oh, the Beatitudes. There's your response. Go read the Beatitudes, man. The poor in spirit, the meek of the earth, the humble in heart, or the humble, the pure of heart, the righteous. Go read the Beatitudes, right? And live out the prayer of the Shema. God is one, and you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And that's how I'll close it. Maranatha, come on back.